So Craig, we've been driving these two V12 beasts. What do you think the main differences are between SV and SVJ? Everyone asks this question, so
okay,
you are the expert.
Wow, I wouldn't say expert, I'll try. Driving them both back to back, I'd say the SV is a lot more agricultural, by the way the car changes gear, the suspension setup on the car. It feels like a traditional V12 Lamborghini, is what I would say about the SV. The SVJ still has the V12 grunt and the power. With the added rear wheel steering though, it just makes the car drive a lot more dynamic. The car really wraps around you, it makes it feel a lot smaller than what it actually is. So the rear wheel steering really helps the SVJ and makes it feel a lot more compliant on the narrow country lanes that we've been driving on, where the SV feels more of a challenge. The SV, let's start with the SV initially. You know, the Roadster, the car we're driving that you took from me in 2016, it's one of 500 cars. From opening the door to pulling that leather strap to get in, it feels like such an occasion. The drive of it, it makes you smile and giggle, feel like a little boy. You know, it's very mechanical, your downshifts, you feel part of the car. In that V12, the noise and the drone you get, no other car competes in my personal opinion. The SV for me will be definitely one of the greats because of just the way it's finished, be it on the outside, the inside, the noise, the mechanical interaction you have with the car. It really feels, when you get used to it, you become one with the machine. Attached to the SV model is it feels a lot more raw, is probably how I would describe it. You know, the handling of the car, the driving of the car. For example, on these country lanes, it feels a lot more fidgety. So in your hands, it moves around a lot more, which does make you feel a lot more alive. But with the SVJ, it's a lot more compliant. But we'll talk about that when we drive the SVJ. But really, the SV just feels exceptional to drive and makes you feel like a little boy. You know, it's the ultimate supercar with that V12 and the power that's always there. It's so the SV has 3 different driving modes as standard. Strada, which is street. I interpret this as comfort mode, where the exhaust valves on the exhaust are shut, so the exhaust is quieter in slower speeds. The suspension is more relaxed, the steering is more relaxed, and also the throttle response. So it's not as urgent to fly off. It still has the power, but in Strada it's just more relaxed and more comfortable to use, let's say, around town. When you hit this button here for Sport will then open the exhaust valves. So you can hear the exhaust a lot more. Obviously the Sport mode with the exhaust valves opening will only work if you have the Sports exhaust software. The exhaust valves will still open higher up the rev range, but with Sport the steering feels a lot more dynamic. It changes the ratio on the steering, the throttle response, and the gearbox reacts a lot faster also. So it's a lot more urgent to take the input, be it from the gear shift or the throttle. And finally, our favourite mode, Corsa. So Corsa in Italian is race. With Corsa, the setup of Corsa, the car is actually more 4-wheel drive, not rear-wheel drive, where in Sport, it's more rear-wheel drive. So in Corsa, it's the best possible performance for a racetrack or fast road. The suspension is set up stiffer, the steering is more responsive, yet again the throttle and also the gearbox is very, very sharp. Corsa for me is a great mode for the driver, but also for the passenger to get the fastest gear shifts.
Now in SVJ.
Yeah, me and this car, I've got history. As you know, we drove this all the way from Monaco to Geneva in one go.
Yeah, it was an amazing drive.
Yeah, I think that's where I fell in love with this car and fully appreciated this car over the predecessor, which is the SV we've just driven. Now back to the modes, we talked about this earlier in the SV. With the SVJ and Aventador S models, they have 4 driver modes. They have Strada, which I've already talked about, which is street or comfort. Sport, which is the more aggressive gear changing, more rear drive biased. Corsa, which is race. So Corsa is, the best optimum for performance on a racetrack. And then Ego. So Ego allows you to personalize 3 settings within the car. The 3 settings that you can personalize, I can show you, are powertrain. So powertrain, be it the gearbox setup and also the 4-wheel drive setup. Steering, so how responsive the steering is, and suspension. So for example, if you were driving along, wanting to have some fun and have all the noise and a really aggressive, sharp steering, in Corsa you could do this, but with the Ego, the benefit of that is you can change suspension down here to Strada. So if the road was quite a bumpy road, you can set the car up to represent Corsa in all the other fun areas. So the drivetrain, the gearbox, the steering is all now pin sharp in racing mode effectively, but your suspension is a lot more compliant on the bumps. For me, on the country lanes, it's a fantastic mode to use and it feels great.
So what do you think of the rear wheel steering?
The rear wheel steering has transformed this car. For me, the car really wraps around you. The predecessor, being the SV, it feels a lot more, as I've already mentioned, agricultural, but as you manage the car around the lanes, you really feel the weight of it. With the rear steering, it makes the car feel a lot more lighter, a lot more manageable, and at higher speed, it's less steering input to keep the car going in a straight line.
So what do you think if I say it feels like single clutch Performante?
Wow, okay. Well, yeah, I mean, in the sense of the steering feel, I can agree with that. The steering feels a lot more precise, just, you know, in small movements, it feels very darty and agile, where with the SV, it doesn't quite have that feel. It's still very precise, but it doesn't bite as quick because the rear is not moving as well as the front. I think one big plus with the rear steering also is the agility you have on slow maneuvering. So if you're doing a turn in a car park, it's a lot more effortless, where maybe in the predecessor you'd have to put it into reverse and do a 2-point turn as opposed to a 1 movement with the rear steering in the SVJ. So I think it's worth talking about the piston symbol you see on the top left-hand corner on the Aventador S and also the SVJ, which is what we're driving. The piston symbol, some people think, oh, what's wrong with the car? Simply what that will show you on the left-hand top-hand side of the instrument binnacle is it shows you what side of the engine is running in Strada mode. So in Strada, it can disable half of the engine, so it will only run on 6 cylinders instead of 12. The reason it would do this is for fuel economy. So around town, 30-mile-an-hour Strada driving, or on the motorway with a very soft balanced throttle, it will then disconnect 6 cylinders, and then it allows you to have better fuel return and consumption. Sorry there, it put me off. Also, to reinforce the fuel economy, the auto start-stop function will also cut in Strada mode.
Which you can turn off from...
Yeah, please turn it off.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. Disable.
So how does the ALA system work? So obviously I can see the screen.
Yes, the ALA system will only work above 50, I think it's 55 kilometers an hour. And you know when it's highlighted and it's working, when the arrows at the front and the rear of the car change color and go blue. So what that means is the front flaps on the very low of the bumper will open, so airflow can go under the car, and then what happens from that is that will then enable the airflow to push the front of the car down. And then from the rear scoop, which sits just in front of the spoiler, will take the air into the scoop and distribute across the spoiler. And it can shut the airflow to the left or the right hand side from the rear spoiler, dependent on the corner inside of the car, the corner and wheel that needs the force. So if I put my foot down here, you'll see it will start to work.